We're here to talk through this Pentominous Borders puzzle by Grant. It uses a lot of look-ahead steps throughout the solve, where after you place some of the shapes, if you took a certain cell, you'll force other cells nearby to form an unallowed shape. And besides the look-ahead steps, the borders variation really takes advantage of the fact, and you could even sort of use different colored pencils or something to do this, is that every time you have a wall, you have distinct pentominoes. What that means is sometimes as these things grow, you'll have a place where you need to add an edge. In this case, if I actually put this in, add an edge, for instance up top, add an edge over here, that the fact that this is limited to exactly a W because of the other shapes coming through is something you'll get from working into the solve. We have a W up here, so if we actually took the cell over to the right, we'd form another W. I'm going to stop using letters from now going forward, but things like this edge should become natural for you as you work forward. This cell coming down would form another W, which would touch this one. That would not be allowed, so it has to come like this. The other place to really make quick headway is down this lower left corner. As we were saying, we have to wrap around this cell and this cell are different pentominoes. With 2 coming in here and 4 coming up from the bottom, this has to be its own group. This can't come up, it would form another U, so it has to come here. This is an N. This extends over, form like something like this. Here's the first look-ahead step maybe. If we say, what if it didn't use this cell, then it has to use these 2. That forms an N next to an N, so it has to use this cell. If we took this one and not that one, we'd leave behind an orphan cell. So it forms this Y shape. Get the start of this shape here. Let's get these into the grid. These 2 cells can't extend all the way over to here. Remember, this cell and this cell are in different shapes, so this has to at least take this cell. It can't continue up, and if it came over and took this one to the left, it would be another Y near a Y. It comes down like this. That now forces this shape to be exactly this P, because it has to take 5 cells as efficiently as you can in a tightly packed space. This here, the critical step is to see these 2 do not connect to these 2. If they did, whichever way they went, it would form another N. There's sort of a wall that's between these 2. These 2 can't extend all the way over here without forming too large a shape, so they at the very least have to take this cell to the left. Puts in this wall. If these 3 continued all the way to this cell, form another L, so it has to come up like this. We now only have 1 pentomino that can reach that cell. Get this shape. Get the start of these here. Notice if we didn't use this cell extending over, we'd form another F shape. So this is the look ahead that gives us this cell. And if this does come down, it forms another X. So we get another shape coming out like this. There's a tricky look-ahead step, but this is, as I say, the critical part in this puzzle. If this pentomino came up, it would form an L. That's okay. The issue is that the remaining space around this pentomino would form another Y, touching this Y. So this cell to the top has to be avoided. You have to use this cell to the right. We still have a little bit of work to do up here, but trying to see the easiest way to force some things in here. Here's the tricky step. If this group doesn't take this cell, then what it forms is an L. And in forming that L, another L, either this one or this one, is formed. So this edge has to be crossed by this pentomino, or you're going to form two L's. With that then placed, we see that this can't take this cell and form a Y next to another Y. Get that shape, get this, get these cells working their way out. This is almost an N, it's touching an N, so it doesn't extend. This is close to forming a W, that would be bad. It's gotta form like this. Now we're at one of the steps you'll see oftentimes in pentomino puzzles, where we have kind of a cul-de-sac here and a limited number of cells here. So what we need to really do is know that multiples of 5 are critical. 5 cells, 10 cells, 14, 19, 20 cells. This would be 21, 22, and so forth. 23, 24, 25 has to extend like this. And there's actually a lot more we can do with that, but I'm going to stop in this area for now. Come back to the lower right corner and fully solve it. This group here, if it came to the right, would form a Z. If it comes down, it blocks off some cells, so it's got to form this shape. There are 3 pentominoes left in the space. This one is not touching here because of this wall. These are also cells that have to belong to it. This is a cell that has to belong to it. You can ask, what if, you know, this pentomino didn't use this cell, it forms this, that forms an L with an L. It's no good, so it has to have this shape. This is next to an L, so it can't use this. Looks like this. This is next to an L, so it can't form an L. So a lot of just look ahead and look around and avoid pentomino shapes to get there. So now we've got to come back to the left side. We're going to work our way to here. You could even do a pretty complex counting and get the fact that this cell and that cell are going to be linked and there's this edge, but let's actually solve for it a little bit and get to that deduction more directly. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a way we can divide the region that these have to include 2 pentominoes. This cell can't belong to this top one, so these are connected. Now that we have 4 cells used, this can't go here. And with an N already in the grid, we can't form another one right next to it. Get this shape. Let's do some look ahead on this P shape. If this P shape took this cell, we'd form another P right away. This is the next sort of tricky look ahead piece. If this group does not take this cell, and one of the reasons you asked for why do you think of testing these look aheads is kind of like you see that a lot of things are going to be forced nearby. So if this doesn't take this cell, we're going to have pentominoes coming up. In particular, we form an N shape. We then form these 3, which can't form an N shape, so they'll form something like a V. If we have a V with this N, we form a P, P near a P, that's no good. So there we have a long chain of 3 shapes, but the shapes will contradict with a P near a P or an N near an N. So we have to take this cell. We're near an F, so we can't take that remaining cell. That cuts us out like this. This is an efficient packing of 5 cells. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is 9 plus 1. We're going to take one of these cells, form a pentomino. There are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 additional to here, not counting this one. So this is now blocking off 15 total cells, or sorry, 20 total cells for pentomino, sorry. The things to think about now are, does this group contain this cell? If it does, note that it's got to come straight across, and then it does one of these things, but it leaves behind a P. So this is not part of this group. Notice that this group can't touch this cell. It's too far away. So these get connected. Now we can ask, there are 6 cells down here. If this group takes this cell, it leaves behind a P shape, so that has to be part of the W that's nearby. We now have to finish out this top, and there you would not necessarily think immediately that it has just one option, but it turns out it has just one option. We're going to chip away at it slowly. The first look ahead step, knowing that it's near an N, is that if these three cells don't use this, it forms another N, so we can draw this in first. If this group takes a cell immediately beneath it, it forces a Y immediately beneath it as well, so this is off limits. If this, recognizing that, we now sort of have enough drawn in, we know that this group has to take these pieces. If this cell connected all the way to this larger group, it forms an N, so that's not going to work, so it has to connect to this group beneath it. These are 4 cells, can't reach all the way down to here. Now we have a T next to a group that can almost form a T. Not going to allow it to do that, so it has to form this P shape. Now we're going to have another kind of look ahead steps, and this step from this cell to the adjacent cell. If these aren't connected, we're going to get the start of a pentomino shape like so. And what you see is that this one on the left forms a W. It's right near a W, so these are joined. Now critically, we can't have a P shape, and a P shape uses a 2 by 2 square, so that will say that if these cells are used, that forms this shape. That will certainly form a P. So we have these two. Remember that this cell is no longer in the same pentomino as this, so we're forced to be able to draw at least these 2 extra cells. This isn't a pentomino, it uses at least these extra cells. These don't connect with this. Now, this shape, if it doesn't use this cell, gets pinned to these 5 cells. Again, forms a W right next to another W, so that's no good. These 2 can't connect up, so it has to come over. Because of this wall, this is a whole different shape. These actually extend to form this L. That means this has to be an I and not an L. We have a little bit of thinking to do here. It looks like this shape, if it comes over and takes this to become an N, the one beneath it has to come to the left and will also become an N. 2 N's can't touch, so that does this. We're going to be forming what looks like an F or a U. We're already near a U, so it's not going to be allowed to not do it. Here's another place look ahead is going to help. Remember that this and this are different cells, so if these aren't used, what I can quickly see is that I form another N. Essentially, there's going to be this connection, and this has to come up. And even besides forming an N near an N, I form a P near a P, so the short answer is this has to come to the right, or near an F. So this comes up. Now we can do a little bit of specific packing up here. Notice that this is going to use one of these 2 cells. It's not going to use this cell, so this cell, let's say this is A. The cell's in B, and whichever of these cells is used, regardless of the choice, B is going to take these 4. And it's even stronger than that statement because B can't form an L shape. What will happen is this is AB, this is AB. We actually split the grid like this. These 10 cells have to form 2 different pentominos, and that's actually quite limited. Specifically, if these 2 cells aren't used together, you're going to see that you form PP. So these have to be part of the same shape. They have to extend to one of these corners. If they didn't extend to one of these corners, you get L, get another P shape. So for this to not form a P, it's got to come to the top, and coming to the top, it's got to get to a side. So it's going to form a W with a P. The only W with a P that doesn't touch this P is the one where the W is on the left. That forms this P. And the final way to do it is just avoiding the P in this upper right corner, forming this. So, this was a somewhat long puzzle. Basically, if you caught some of the look-ahead steps, like here, or some of the steps here, if you could exactly pack this space to get a P to be able to then fit this, Like this really got some of the Pentomino look-ahead thinking used to maximum extent. That's sort of why it ended up as a Saturday puzzle. But it is a fun variation. It has the use of borders really draws a lot of space, a lot of shape constraints in the grid, and so it was a fun contribution from Grant. This was his original variation, and we are happy to highlight again. Hope you learned a little bit about solving Pentominous Borders puzzles, and we'll see you again soon.